Good evening, everybody, and welcome to College Football Wraparound here on this Wednesday, January 17th. And, folks, I'm finally back to my regular Wednesday spot here that I like having, 8 o'clock Central Time. So, we're still kind of snowed in. Well, iced in, snowed in, whatever you want to call it. I'm not able to go anywhere. So, that's why I've given you yesterday, I gave you a video live here on the channel, and tonight I'm giving you more because you know what? Let's give you more college football content while I have some time to do it with, And so I'm very excited that you are here tonight. So, what are we doing tonight? Well, as I promised you last night, how about we look at the Big Ten schedule? And exclusively just that. So, no other topics tonight. Just talking about Big Ten football in itself. Now, we've already talked about the SEC schedule. That was back about a month ago, I believe. And there's going to be some good matchups there. However, the Big Ten, I think, has got some good matchups as well. So, whose schedules are we looking at tonight? We're looking at Michigan, Ohio State. We're going to look at Oregon, and we're going to look at USC. That's the four teams we're going to focus on tonight. You can always comment below if you believe that we need to take a dive into some other teams within the Big Ten that have some interesting schedules. For instance, we could look at Washington, Penn State, UCLA, Nebraska is another team we could look at. So, of course, keep in mind that, comment below if you think we need to look at more schedules because, we still got quite a while before next year, the next college football season. So, Colton Naylor already on the YouTube side of things, he's saying look at Purdue. So, we can look at Purdue. Thank you for that comment. And also, Colton Naylor from YouTube as well is saying look at Northwestern. Okay, cool. Yeah, we can look at them too. I can make a mental note of that here on my other screen here. So, of course, like I said, we're going to start off with Michigan tonight. And so we can turn over there. So, of course, courtesy of FBSschedules.com, this is where I find all the schedules. And so you look at what they have right here. So they're going to start out the season against Fresno State. Then they got Texas, Arkansas State, USC, Minnesota. It's not till October 5th when they finally go on the road. And then they got a bye week, and then they'll go to Illinois. Then they got Michigan State, Oregon, then at Indiana. And then if you will give me just a second, because I'll have to scroll down. Here we go. And then, of course, bye week after being on the road at Indiana. And then they'll have Northwestern and Ohio State. So, of course, as always, the game between Michigan and Ohio State's always going to be circled. Everybody's looking at it, and it's an incredible matchup. Some other ones that I'm really interested in is because if you look at our SBN rankings, your 3 and 4 are actually scheduled to play on November 2nd between Michigan and Oregon. That is an interesting matchup. That is one that I think, quite frankly, you could see. It's going to be interesting because, and I'll turn back to me just for 1 second, but let's say Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan like it's being rumored. He may leave. That's an interesting matchup. You got Dan Lanning, who's been at Oregon for 2 or 3 years, and then you'll have a first-year head coach at Michigan. That's an interesting matchup. Now, I will say the one thing I've noticed about Michigan is that this past year they proved they could win without Jim Harbaugh, but this is going to be a totally different team. Now, of course, that's November 2nd, so you'll know a little bit more about Michigan by the time November 2nd comes around. But That's one to really keep your eye on, is that Michigan-Oregon game. Another one with Jonathan Smith recently going to Michigan State. I think that's a incredibly interesting game between Michigan and Michigan State. It's a rivalry game. You got like I said, Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State. It's going to be interesting to see what can he do, because I don't figure they're going to be incredible year one. They're in East Lansing, but man, with him being there, I think it's interesting. And so another one's that Washington game. Of course, Washington's going to have a new head coach in Jedd Fisch. That's going to be interesting to see as well. That Texas game, though, and USC as well. This is a loaded schedule for a Michigan team that just won the national championship game. And again, like I said, I think a lot of it hinges on where is Jim Harbaugh at next season? Is he going to be coaching at Michigan? Is he going to be coaching in the NFL? He actually was interviewing, I believe, with the Chargers and the Falcons. He's already interviewed with. So that's something to keep in mind, folks, is that although we don't talk NFL here on this channel very much at all, is that when it comes to Harbaugh, he's a guy who actually he had success in the NFL as well as winning this national championship in Michigan, which is his alma mater. So I think that's one thing you got to remember, is that it's going to be incredibly interesting to see what does Harbaugh do, because depending on what he does, I think that'll depend on what the team does. A lot like how Alabama, Saban retires, and so you basically have a overhaul of the whole team. A bunch of players are transferring out, and you got Kalen DeBoer as the new head coach. So that is very interesting indeed, just to see what could happen with Jim Harbaugh. I think has a lot hinging on what Michigan does next season. So we turn back over here. Just a quick preview. Texas is going to have Quinn Ewers and a lot of that offense back for Texas. That's an incredibly interesting game because according to our SBN rankings, we've got Michigan at 3, Texas at 5. Top 5 matchup right there. USC. You got USC at 17, so you got a top 17 matchup between those two. You got Washington, I believe they were at number 13, yeah. So top 13 matchup right there. I will say this. I think in today's climate of college football, if you're a team like Michigan, you just won the national championship game, and you're playing in a conference like the Big Ten, you got so many statement games right there, and plus with the 12-team playoff, as long as you're close in all those games, and then let's say you only win, let's say you go 8-4. With that schedule, it's going to be hard to leave you out. I mean, you can comment below if you disagree with me, but I mean, you got USC, Washington, Oregon. I mean, Ohio State always, Texas. So Michigan has got an incredibly difficult schedule, I think. And I will say this, it is going to be hard for them to defend their national championship. That's just my opinion. Because right now, in the SBN rankings, we got Alabama and Georgia as the top 2 teams in the country. Y'all voted on it. Along with me, I voted on it too. I mentioned that last night. I put my own take into that as well. But very interesting to see what is going to happen with the Michigan Wolverines. So that's a little bit of their schedule as of right now. So right now, I'm going to go to our next schedule, which is going to be the Ohio State Buckeyes. There we go. Got it pulled all up here for you. And so, real quickly, before we get into Ohio State, comment below what you think about that Michigan schedule. If you agree with me that it will be incredibly difficult for them to defend their national championship, and then also if you have any kind of comment on if you disagree with me, agree with me that as long as they're 9-3, they probably should be in the playoff. I mean, I just want to see what y'all's opinions are on this as well, because that's just something I like to do. Just get your opinions as well. So, let's go ahead and look at Ohio State. So, you can already see right at this top that the out of conference schedule for Ohio State is relatively easy compared to previous years, because as you note, they began the season not this past year but the last year. They played at home against Notre Dame. Then last year, I believe it was week 4, they went on the road to Notre Dame. So you think about that. And this year, for the Ohio State Buckeyes, they have their 3 non-conference games at the beginning of the season, and quite frankly, they're easy matchups for them. These are cupcake games. These are cakewalks. You got Akron, you got Western Michigan, and you got Marshall. And then you will have Michigan at Michigan State. You got Iowa. You got at Oregon. Then you got another bye week. Then you got Nebraska, at Penn State, Purdue, at Northwestern, Indiana, and then Michigan. I will say this. I will give you a prediction right now. I don't think Ohio State has what it takes to get to the Big Ten championship. I kind of mentioned that last night, when I was showing you my rankings. But Ohio State, as it sits right now, I don't see them going to the Big Ten championship. And that, for that matter, I don't see them. I don't know if they will go to the playoff. But all time will tell. Here's my thing, though. The one thing that will help them is that they, like Colton Naylor just mentioned right here, is that Ohio State will either go 12-0 or 10-2. Yeah, that's pretty much how it is for Ohio State. And especially with that non-conference schedule, that helps them a lot. So, I mean, you go back over here, you look at these matchups. I mean, Michigan is not an easy game. You've lost 3 straight years to Michigan. That's not going to be an easy game. You still got to go. It's crazy because just 3 years ago, we were sitting here and saying, Michigan's got to get over the Ohio State hump. Well, you know what? Now it's flip-flopped. Ohio State has got to get over that Michigan barrier. Quite frankly, I don't see it happening next year. Now, you look at these other games, they're going to go to Penn State. That's one notable game. I think it's an easier game than that's one of the, I think they'll probably end up winning that game. You got Nebraska. Now, Nebraska's a team, people's been saying this for years. Oh, Nebraska's going to be good. But Nebraska is a team that has been good enough to win games, but they cannot finish when it counts. So I expect that game to be incredibly close between Ohio State and Nebraska. Don't think for 1 minute that is going to be a blowout, because that is going to be a close game. Nebraska plays everybody close. Plus, Nebraska? Yeah, I think Nebraska is going to be pretty good next season. And then you got at Oregon and at Michigan State and Iowa. Really, right now, I think the toughest game on this schedule is Oregon or Michigan. Either one of those are going to be your toughest game. I think they lose both of those games. If I'm looking at it from right now. Now, of course, these are early predictions. I will be honest with you, though. Michigan and Oregon, I don't see them letting Ohio State beat them at this moment. So, that's the thing that everybody's got to keep in mind, is that Oregon and Michigan right now, I think, are the top 2 teams of the Big Ten here early on. but we will all figure that out a little bit later down the road. But that's the conference schedule for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And so I'm going to scroll up for you, show you again. I mean, Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall. That is who Ohio State will begin the season against. In a world where everybody's like, oh, no cupcake games. SEC, they always play cupcake games. Well, look at Ohio State, folks. What does Ohio State play next season outside of Big Ten competition? It's cupcake games. So, I mean, let me tell you something. SEC bias can be debunked when you start getting into the numbers, the schedules, and how things add up in this sport. But I digress. All right, it's time to go on to our next schedule, and that is the Oregon Ducks. And before I get into this, of course, this is the first of two teams I'll talk about tonight that is coming over from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. And I got to tell you, Oregon, like I've been talking about them all throughout this video, but Oregon's going to be a fun team to watch, I think, next season. Even though they lost Bo Nix, but you know what? They got Dillon Gabriel from Oklahoma, who actually started out his career at UCF, being coached under former Oklahoma quarterback Josh Heupel. So you get a little bit of an idea about, oh, that's the kind of offense Dillon Gabriel likes to run. It's that fast pace. No huddle. Just throw the ball around the yard. Run the ball some, but it's quick pace kind of play. The same thing you see Josh Heupel do. Same thing you see Lane Kiffin do. Same thing you saw Oklahoma do this past season. And it's going to be interesting to see what Oklahoma does with the offense. But Dillon Gabriel, it's going to be interesting. I think the offense Oregon's going to do is going to tailor a lot to Dillon Gabriel. That's what all good coaches do, is tailor their offenses around their starting quarterback. But let's get into the schedule because I'm actually interested to see this. So, Oregon begins the season against Idaho, and then they got a Boise State matchup at home. Then they go on the road to Corvallis to play the Oregon State Beavers. Now, I got to tell you something, folks. Let me turn back to me real quick. Going to Oregon State, I love this. Unlike Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, I love that these two teams right here, and the same goes for Washington and Washington State, but I love the fact that these teams have decided that, you know what? Yeah, we may be leaving a conference with you, but let's schedule something and compete against you still. Let's keep the rivalry going. And it really makes me think about Iowa and Iowa State as well. They're not in the same conference, but they play Florida, Florida State, Georgia, and Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, Kentucky, Louisville. You still get these big-time matchups that are rivalry games that are not, conference affiliated. And I love that about the way that they're scheduling this with Oregon and Oregon State. It's good for the sport to have these rivalries continue playing. And you may be saying, Cooper, it's Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon most likely will win most of these matchups. Well, not so fast, though. Oregon State, these last few years, and it was with Jonathan Smith, and they got a new head coach. I know that. But it's been interesting. And so it's a rivalry game. Oregon State's going to hang around in these games. Trust me about it. They will. So I'm interested to see just how incredible these matchups are going to be between Oregon and Oregon State. I love that they keep the rivalry going, but let's go back to their schedule. Bye week after the Oregon State game, then they will head to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA. And then they got Michigan State, Ohio State, at Purdue, Illinois, at Michigan, Maryland, at Wisconsin, bye week, and then the Washington Huskies. So right now, as I'm looking at this schedule, folks, I am thinking this is going to be a harder schedule than Ohio State for sure. Quite frankly, from the 3 schedules I've seen so far, Ohio State, if they play right, they should be undefeated. But I don't see them going undefeated, but I digress about that as well. Either way, going to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, I don't think that's going to be an easy game. Of course, Ohio State's not an easy game. Michigan State's not going to be an easy game. Michigan's not an easy game. Wisconsin's not an easy game. Washington's not an easy game. Oregon is gonna have to go prove it. I think they could do it. I think they could definitely go and prove how good they are. This right here, and I'll cut back to me. Oregon, that's a tough schedule. And the one that I really am looking forward to is, I mean, you look at the schedule. I'll be honest. That Washington game, I'm interested to see it. Jedd Fisch, what is his team going to look like there in Washington? I mean, that's going to be interesting. The Wisconsin game, I think it's a team that people are going to overlook early and be like, they're not going to be that good. But I think Luke Fickell's going to get them going up there in Madison, Wisconsin. I think that's going to be interesting for sure. And then Michigan, as always, defending champs. That's going to be an interesting game. Purdue is interesting, but I think Oregon will most likely win the game. Michigan State. Now, I think that's an interesting game because Jonathan Smith is making his way back to Michigan State, not to Michigan State, but to Oregon. Back up there to Eugene, Oregon. I think it's an interesting game. Very interesting game indeed. And I don't think he gets a warm welcome there in Eugene, even though, I mean, he coached for Oregon State. So, I mean, this is an interesting matchup between Oregon and Michigan State, I think. I think it's like I said, interesting matchup for sure. And, folks, this schedule, it gets me excited for the college football season that is going to come up. I mean, we are in January, and this stuff is not starting till late August, and I'm like, come on, let's get our college football back. And so, very interesting right there to see what they have. What I'm going to do now is I'm fixing to look at the USC schedule, and then after that, if you have any questions, you can leave that into the chat. I will look at it and answer it as possible. But we're going to turn to our last schedule, folks, to look at tonight. And that is the USC Trojans. Now, folks, this one potentially is the hardest schedule of anyone's when it comes to non-conference. Now, what they do inside the conference is interesting. We're going to look at this. So, of course, they start out by playing in Las Vegas on the night before Labor Day, on that Sunday night, September 1st, against LSU. What is going to be a interesting game for sure. For context from our SBN poll, you're going to have the, I believe, number 8 team in the country, LSU, against the number 17 team, USC. That's an interesting matchup for sure, folks. And then they will play Utah State. Then they got a bye week. And then at Michigan right out of that. And then they're going to have Wisconsin at Minnesota, Penn State at Maryland, Rutgers at Washington, then another bye week, and then Nebraska at UCLA. And they finish the season against Notre Dame. So, folks, you look at this USC schedule. I think there's a potential here. USC, I think, will be a very interesting team. I think they'll be good. But, looking at it, they have some tough matchups that they're going to have to get by. And what do I say right here is some tough matchups is, for instance, that Michigan game. I don't know if they can beat Michigan, to be honest with you. Wisconsin's going to be a tough game, I think. Penn State's one I don't think you should really sleep on. I think they'll give them a fight. Washington's going to be interesting. Nebraska. Like I said, I think Nebraska is going to be interesting to watch next season. And then Notre Dame, that's a team not to sleep on. And then, of course, don't forget about LSU. They're in the SEC. I mean, it's interesting because there is just interesting matchups here for the USC Trojans. There's a world where they could go undefeated. Definitely they could go undefeated. But do I think they'll go undefeated? I don't think they will. They're going to lose one of these games, folks. And when they do, whether it's against LSU, whether it's against Michigan, whether it's against Nebraska, Notre Dame, I think they slip up at least once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. It's a Lincoln Riley coach team. I think he's a good coach. But I think that his teams have been known for having seasons where you could lose games that it's like, why are you losing these games? And then he's got teams where it's incredible and you're like, wow, this team is good. And I think it has to say a lot about the culture there at USC that it didn't seem like there was a lot of people who were mad at Lincoln Riley for the way the season went at 7-5 last season. There was some, but not as much as what I would have thought. And I think it goes back to, and I like to use this example here, is that if Alabama doesn't win 10 games, then the fans are mad. Because Alabama has that standard of winning championships. I'm going to question this. Does USC strive for championships at this moment? Or is it more one of those things where you just have to be good enough? As long as you make the playoffs, you're good. Is it one of those things where you're not incentivized at USC to win a national championship? Is that actually the goal there? Is it like a team like Auburn who is just looking to beat Alabama every year? Is it like a team like Ohio State? To be honest with you, I think Ohio State, as long as they beat Michigan, I think that's the big deal there in Columbus. Vice versa, I think Michigan, most of the time, as long as they beat Ohio State, I think that's the main goal there. So, what is the motivation for USC? Do they want to win championships? Or is it just they just want to be a 10-win team, beat their rivals, and that's it? So, of course, Chris Naylor right here is saying that Cooper and Colton are USC haters. I'm not a hater. I just have a lot of concerns for the way USC operates. And when it came to Caleb Williams last season, I know that was a player that a lot of fans here have been talking about that I like dog out a lot. Well, it's because I don't know if he has that mental capacity to be a great leader in the NFL, because some of the way things went down after losing games, it's like, okay, this guy, I don't think he could actually lead an NFL team, because that's what the quarterback is in an NFL team, is a leader. So that's part of why I was like, okay, this guy's a little bit not the best candidate or prospect in the NFL. So that is some schedules within the Big Ten. If you have any questions, this is your moment right now to get them out there for me to answer as it concerns to college football. Of course, a lot of stuff to still be talked about. Of course, next week is when I'll be back. Planning on next Wednesday night being back. Another episode of College Football Wraparound. But if you got any questions, please let me know right now, because this is your opportunity. Of course, Sunday night is going to be exciting. I've got a pre-recorded interview that will be dropping. So that will be fun. 8 o'clock, both YouTube and Rumble. if you want to watch that. So going to be a very fun couple of days. I'm going to try, of course, getting some clips out on YouTube and Rumble throughout the week. We'll see how that goes. And then, so it has been a fun night. So I'm going to look at some of these other comments you got up here. And then if you got anything, just put it in the chat. Going back to the Michigan stuff, Colton Naylor says if Harbaugh comes back, they're easily going 12-0 or 11-1. If they don't get him back, they're going to be 8-4. Yeah, I can see that. Colton Naylor also says Oregon is going to be 9-3 without Bo Nix. I disagree a little bit. Ohio State has improved their quarterback and running back positions in the transfer portal. Still, I have a lot of questions for Ohio State. So, okay, here we go. Right now, who in the mind of Cooper Naylor will be playing for the Big Ten Championship? Well, if I look at it right now, to be honest with you, I could see a world where it could potentially be a Michigan-Oregon matchup for the Big Ten Championship there in Indianapolis. I think that'd be a fun one to watch, to be honest with you. And, I mean, you got Michigan defending national champions against Oregon, Dan Lanning, Dylan Gabriel. The defense, I think, will be pretty good next season. Offense will definitely be pretty good for Oregon. So, I mean, that's something to watch out for. I think it's an interesting matchup if you get Oregon and Michigan. So, also, I will ask you, the chat, if you disagree, who do you have in the Big Ten Championship? I mean, that's a good question, I think, because I have a belief that it's Michigan and Oregon. So, who do you have in the Big Ten Championship is a good question. So, of course, you can get back to me on that. Of course, going to be an interesting season coming up. Going to be a very interesting season. So the two teams that I question is who Chris Naylor has got in the Big Ten Championship. Colton Naylor, interesting. Ohio State and Wisconsin. Interesting indeed. So that is where I'm going to leave you for tonight for College Football Wraparound. We talked about the Big Ten schedules, and so after this video ends, in the comments, you can down below in the comments, please let me know if you want to look at more of these Big Ten schedules. Of course, I've already got written down Purdue and Northwestern to look at. So if there's any more teams you want to look at that I didn't talk about tonight, please put it in the comments. Don't forget, follow us on Rumble, subscribe on YouTube, leave a like, leave a comment, do all of it. Also, one thing I've always forgot to tell this, but on both Rumble and YouTube, make sure you are allowing all notifications so that anytime we have any kind of video that's going to come out, either live, YouTube short, just regular video being dropped, that you want to turn all notifications on your mobile device so that you can get any notification that you need. So, with that being said, I want to thank you all for watching tonight. And, those who live in the North Alabama area, please stay safe because it is still very icy outside, hard to drive on the roads. So if you need to get out, be very safe. But in other words, thanks for watching the show, everybody. Good night. Hello, everyone. Tonight, I am here to tell you that we have a special deal for you coming up with Saber Broadcast Network. We are going to be doing a buy one, get one free kind of sale. So, what kind of sale could I tell you it is? We will be selling t-shirts, Saber Broadcast Network t-shirts, and what comes free? This special little coaster, Saber Broadcast Network coaster you can use to sit your drink on. So, if you want some good, high-quality material in a shirt and a nice little coaster to come free, then we have a community post that we'll be putting out, and we will tell you all about it and where to contact and everything about it. So hope that you will consider getting this item as part of your collection